Altitude sickness is one of those specific areas that is only for the backcountry. If we run into another issue with altitude sickness in the front country, it would be because someone drove to that but has access or is a high altitude city or town. So, altitude sickness, what's happening is there's a decreased amount of oxygen in a person's bloodstream. So, as we get to higher elevations, the pressure changes and oxygen is harder to get. Although we're breathing in the same amount of air, we don't have as much oxygen in each of those breaths. Okay. And there are three levels of altitude sickness. So, you have acute mountain sickness, AMS. That's the majority of the time what you're going to see in places like the Sierra. But you do have high altitude sickness from the cerebral, the brain, which is HACE, or high altitude pulmonary, the lungs, which is HAPE. Okay, HAPE and HACE are major rapid evac situations where if someone has HACE and their brain is not working properly, they start to act out and start to be very crazy. They don't act themselves, they start to be extreme, okay? High altitude pulmonary, HAPE, is when it's affecting the lungs, and then the lungs start to fill with fluid, and there is issues and discomfort, okay? Both are rapid evacs because they can absolutely kill someone right away, okay? Um, but that's for much higher altitudes versus something that we're dealing with in the Sierra is going to be more of the acute mountain sickness. It's important to note that every single person, no matter how fit you are, is capable of getting AMS or altitude sickness, okay? In fact, I would argue that people who are fitter and can get to higher elevations at quicker pace are more susceptible because their body has not actually acclimated to that lack of oxygen. So we start to see this around 6,500 feet to 8,000 feet and higher. Okay, the only way to treat this is to go down. So if you're starting to feel like you're being affected by the altitude, then you need to either stay put and allow your body to adjust, or better yet, actually move to a lower altitude where you start to feel better. Okay, some of these symptoms that we're looking for is, are you recently at 6,500 feet to 8,000 feet or higher? This is when it starts to get triggered. So, for example, if you're in Fresno and you're at 300 feet elevation, you drive up to Yosemite in the morning and you hike to the top of Half Dome, you can start running into these issues, right? Because you have not allowed your body to um, acclimate. Do you have a headache? Loss of your normal appetite? You're starting to feel nauseous. You can or cannot vomit. A lot of times people have difficulty sleeping the first night that they're at elevation. This is all of the altitude sickness, that acute mountain sickness that you are feeling. So again, to give care, the only thing you can do is actually go down, right? And start getting to a lower altitude so that way you can be treated for that. If it is severe and you have access to it, you can administer oxygen. That will treat the person much quicker. Okay, we want to treat it before it's an issue, before it's transitioned into HAPE or HACE when things get terrible. You are recommended to give the person aspirin or acetaminophen for their headaches, okay? And if the person is able to swallow and of course can do these. So this is not something, again, like any medication, we cannot administer a medication for, but we can provide that for the person if they're able. You're going to care for the symptom, the illness, not just the symptoms. So the reason that we say this is because normally we're reacting, but we can actually be proactive by bringing someone to a lower elevation. So to give care, you descend, okay? You keep the person from getting too cold or getting too hot. Make sure to keep them as neutral and homeostatic as possible. You'll notice these really neat. You'll probably won't see these anytime in the near future in that picture, but those are actually tanks to help get people acclimated to an altitude and help treat them quicker, okay? So when we're talking about HACE, high altitude so the brain, right? So this is a loss of coordination. People start to act odd, walk around. The brain tissue has officially stopped receiving the right amounts of oxygen. Okay, so their personality changes. We might be seeing comas or seizures. This is absolutely severe and should have been treated like preferably before it got to this case. But we want to get that person at a lower elevation as quickly as possible. HAPE, so the pulmonary, the lungs, this is a dry cough, shortness of breath, even at rest, even if the person is sitting down and relaxing. Okay, this can be very scary, and it's very noticeable. It's not a common thing that you will see and be able to look away. It's gonna these possible chest pains and the shortness of breath is going to be very easy to notice. Okay. How do you care for this? Descend. Get the person down, right? We've talked about that. Cold temperatures are going to affect HAPE even more. You're going to want to administer oxygen as soon as possible and get them into that chamber that I was talking about, the hyperbaric chamber that we were showing you in the last slide. Always call for help, always evac. Even if someone starts to feel better, they need to be treated.